Good news could be coming soon for the Steelers defense. Joey Porter Jr. and Alex Highsmith might be ready to return as early as Sunday. And that's a big boost to a unit that's been holding things together despite some obvious struggles. But on the other side of the ball, things aren't quite as promising. Calvin Austin III is expected to miss time with a shoulder injury, and that absence only shines a bigger spotlight on a problem the Steelers haven't really addressed for months. They do not have a legitimate second wide receiver. Let's be blunt. This isn't a new issue. This isn't something that just popped up because of Austin's injury. This is something that's been obvious since training camp in Latrobe, something you could spot just by watching a single practice. George Pickens is WR1, no debate. But after him, it's been a mess of maybes, a handful of names, and no real production to back them up. The Steelers went into the season knowing that their receiving core was shallow, and they bet on internal development instead of external help. Now, that bet is looking riskier by the day. Calvin Austin was never guaranteed to be the second option. He's small, he's had trouble staying healthy, and while he's shown flashes, no one could honestly say he was locked in as a consistent threat. Now with his shoulder injury expected to linger, the same question that's been whispered since the offseason is back. Only now it's being shouted. When is Omar Khan going to bring in a real WR2? Technically, the Steelers do have one wide receiver performing at a high level, and that's George Pickens. But behind him, it's basically blank space. Scotty Miller, Roman Wilson, Ben Skoranek. Those are the names trying to fill that gap, and while each has a role, none of them screams starter. Miller gets love from the quarterbacks. All of them seem to trust him, and he's definitely going to be a reliable short yardage option. Roman Wilson has his fan base, no doubt. There's a belief among the public that he hasn't been given a fair shot, that he's being held back by the coaching staff for reasons that nobody quite understands. But the truth is, Wilson hasn't done anything yet on an NFL field to warrant more snaps. The potential is there, but that's all it is, potential. And Skoranek? Great special teams guy. Had a cool moment with that touchdown in New Jersey, but nobody's mistaking him for a high-level offensive weapon. So what does this leave the Steelers with? A single dynamic receiver in Pickens and a whole lot of maybe behind him. The real issue here isn't just WR2. It's what happens if WR1 goes down. If Pickens were to miss time, the drop-off would be catastrophic. There's nobody on this roster who can run his routes, draw his attention, or command that kind of coverage. And that's where things get dicey. Now, could the team go out and sign someone? Sure. There are always veterans floating around, guys who've played in similar systems or who could learn quickly. But signing a free agent in Week 6 and expecting him to be anything more than a stopgap is wishful thinking. The more realistic option, and one that the coaching staff is clearly flirting with, is shifting roles internally, specifically with the tight ends. Jonnu Smith and Pat Freiermuth were barely used in that game in Ireland. Combined, they played fewer than 32 snaps. Not because they aren't good players. Smith, in particular, is coming off a season where he caught 88 passes and converted 55 of them into first downs, but because the Steelers went heavy on protection. Spencer Anderson came in as a sixth offensive lineman, and Darnell Washington basically became the starting tight end, logging 48 of the team's 53 snaps. Washington was effective, both in the run game and with a couple of timely receptions, but the question remains, why are Smith and Freiermuth standing on the sideline when your offense is struggling to convert third downs? Smith is the definition of a third down threat. His numbers prove it. He's not a flashy name, and he's not going to stretch the field vertically, but he moves the chains. Freiermuth, despite the recent criticism, is still a reliable option, especially in the intermediate zones. He's got soft hands, runs crisp routes, and has shown he can be a safety valve for whoever is under center. You've got two tight ends capable of being productive, and yet they're being underused. Not because they can't play, but because the offensive line needs extra help. That's the real story here, and it's not getting talked about enough. The offensive line is struggling so badly that the Steelers are forced to use 6 linemen and a blocking tight end just to keep the quarterback upright. When you're dedicating 2 extra bodies to the line of scrimmage, you're sacrificing options in the passing game. That's why Smith and Freiermuth are sitting. That's why you're not seeing multiple tight end sets that attack the seams or open up space over the middle. The Steelers are playing offense with training wheels, and until the line improves, the scheme is going to stay limited. It's not ideal, but it's the reality they're facing. And it leads to another uncomfortable truth. If the offensive line can't hold up with 5 men, and if the tight ends are needed as blockers, then your already thin receiving group becomes even more exposed. That's why people are calling for a move at WR. That's why the pressure is on Khan to go out and get someone. Not just a backup, not just a body. Someone who can actually fill in for Pickens in case of injury. Someone who can step in and produce right away. Would a trade solve that? Possibly. Would a free agent? Less likely. But what's clear is that relying on guys like Wilson, Miller, or Skoranek to develop mid-season into starting-caliber receivers is a massive gamble. This team doesn't have time to wait. They're in a division where every win matters, where the margin for error is razor-thin. They can't afford to lose games because they don't have enough firepower at wideout. Still, even with the receiver issue looming, the offense's core issue continues to be the offensive line. It's the foundation, and right now it's cracking. You can bring in all the receivers you want, but if the quarterback doesn't have time to throw, or if the offense can't stay on schedule, none of it matters. The team needs to find a way to get production out of its tight ends, even while compensating for the line's deficiencies. Washington is a great blocker, no doubt, but if he's the only tight end on the field, you're leaving potential yardage on the bench. Jonnu Smith's numbers with the Dolphins last season speak for themselves. Over 60% of his catches move the chains. That's not a stat you ignore, especially when your offense can't convert third downs. You don't need a game breaker at every position, but you do need consistency. You need players who can make the routine plays, who can help you extend drives, and keep your defense off the field. Right now, the Steelers have those players. They're just not using them. As for Freiermuth, the drop in confidence around him seems overblown. He hasn't become a worse player overnight. He's still young, still developing, and still has the tools to be a productive part of this offense. Maybe he's not a top 5 tight end in the league, but he doesn't need to be. He needs to be involved. He needs to be part of the plan. Because when you're this limited in your receiver group, the tight ends become even more valuable. And that's where things stand right now. The Steelers have one elite receiver, a bunch of question marks behind him, and a pair of tight ends who are watching too much from the sidelines. The offensive line is dictating everything: the scheme, the personnel, the game plan. Until that changes, until the line can stand on its own, the Steelers are going to be limited. And that's a tough spot to be in when you're trying to keep pace in a loaded AFC North. Let's not pretend this is all doom and gloom, though. There are pieces here. There are solutions. Maybe not perfect ones, but enough to patch things together. Darnell Washington, for example, might be turning a corner. In Ireland, he didn't just hold his own, he dominated. Blocking, catching, moving defenders. He looked like a guy who belongs. If he can keep that up, if he can become a real threat, it changes things. He's not TE3 anymore. Not after that performance. He's pushing for a bigger role, and if the coaching staff is paying attention, they'll give it to him. And while all eyes are on the wide receivers and how to patch together an offense with only one true threat, the truth is that Pittsburgh's problems go deeper than just personnel. It's about how this team is using the pieces it already has. There's a sense of stubbornness in the current system, a reluctance to shift roles or embrace unorthodox solutions. The coaching staff seems married to a structure that no longer fits the reality of the roster. They're trying to run a standard offense without standard parts, and that disconnect is starting to show. The most frustrating part is that they actually have versatile players, guys who could be used in different roles to cover gaps. Instead, they're sticking to a rigid alignment. Jonnu Smith is a perfect example of that. A player with experience, strong numbers, and a clear ability to move the chains, and yet, the only time he gets real usage is when the matchup dictates a certain scheme. That can't be the case anymore. If you're missing wideouts and struggling to protect the quarterback, the tight end should be more involved by default, not less. You don't need to reinvent the playbook. You just need to adjust the roles slightly, slide Smith out wide or into the slot, Let Freiermuth work the middle of the field. Let Darnell handle the blocking. It's not complicated. What's complicated is refusing to adapt. That Ireland game proved something important. When asked to step up, Darnell Washington can do more than just block. He can impose his will. He may not be as polished as Smith or as fluid as Freiermuth, but he brings an edge that the offense is sorely lacking. You saw it in the way he moved defenders, in the way he anchored that extra protection for Broderick Jones, and in the way he made the most out of every target that came his way. It's not flashy, but it's effective. He's becoming a tone setter. And when a player shows that kind of ability, that kind of intensity, you don't leave him on the sideline. You build with him. What's interesting is that this offensive unit, despite all its flaws, has weapons that other teams would love to have. Najee Harris is still a tough runner. Jaylen Warren adds versatility. The tight ends are a clear strength. And Kenny Pickett, even though he's still learning, has the raw tools and the poise to be a game manager who can develop into something more. But the system is choking them. It's making everyone look worse than they are. Third downs are a disaster not because these players can't convert, but because the design keeps the ball out of the hands of the guys who can actually move the chains. This goes back to Arthur Smith's philosophy. He wants physicality. He wants to win with toughness. That's understandable, even admirable. But toughness without flexibility becomes predictable. If the defense knows you're going heavy, they're going to match that look and dare you to beat them with speed you don't currently have at receiver. That's why the offensive stagnation feels so self-inflicted. This isn't a roster that's loaded with elite pass catchers, but it's not devoid of talent either. There are ways to scheme around it. There are ways to manufacture mismatches. But it's not going to happen if you keep putting the same pieces in the same places, running the same concepts, and hoping something changes. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and hit the like button on this video. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. Whispers across the NFL have finally turned into what insiders are calling a done deal. Christian KIRK, the electrifying wide receiver known for his explosive plays under the Florida sun, is reportedly heading to Pittsburgh, swapping sunny skies for the steel-gray cityscape of the Steelers' home turf. While the team has yet to make an official announcement, sources close to the locker room insist that the deal is finalized, sending ripples of excitement and a fair share of shock through the league. KIRK, who has dazzled fans with his speed, precise routes, and knack for finding the end zone, has long been linked with several contenders, but the Steelers appear to have won the sprint. Speculation is that Pittsburgh is looking to inject some much-needed firepower into their passing game, and KIRK's versatility as both a deep threat and slot receiver makes him a perfect fit. Some analysts suggest that pairing him with the Steelers' current roster could create one of the most dynamic receiving corps in the AFC. The move also marks a significant shift for KIRK himself, leaving the familiar warmth of Florida for the intense, sometimes harsh atmosphere of Pittsburgh. Rumor has it that he's already mentally preparing for the adjustment, not just in climate, but in playbook complexity and the culture of a team with a rich, demanding history. Steelers fans are reportedly buzzing with anticipation, imagining the kind of explosive plays KIRK could bring to Heinz Field. Social media is ablaze with speculation, memes, and debates about where KIRK will line up and how his arrival might change Pittsburgh's offensive strategy. While official confirmation is still pending, the chatter in NFL circles is impossible to ignore. Could KIRK be the missing piece the Steelers have been hunting for? Only time will tell, but for now, the rumor mill is running at full throttle, and one thing seems clear. Christian KIRK's next chapter is about to unfold in Steel Country, and fans on both coasts are watching with bated breath. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Pittsburgh Steelers, make sure to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and give this video a like. We always look forward to hearing your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.